Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and this is my daughter Serenity. She's been on a couple of videos and top 10 lists that I've done. We are playing with a die here. We'll see how long she actually stays with me before she decides to crawl away, because she can do that now. Alright, so something I really want to mention to you guys, just so you understand, is that there's a couple options that could have been on this top 10 list, but I took them off. The main reason being that those particular games are Hall of Fame entries for me. So essentially, those games will not take up a space on the top 10 solo card game list. But wanted to mention them in the description of the video. So you either see them in the pinned comment or the description as two games that could easily fall into the top 10 solo card games, but have been retired on my channel into the Hall of Fame because they're so popular within the solo community that there's no reason for them to take up a spot on the top 10, as everyone knows they are amazing. But without further ado, before Serenity decides to pull off a game like Risk or Potion Explosion off the shelf and try something, or potentially start gambling, which it looks like she's about to do, Serenity looking at a gigantic wall of games and likely trying to pull it down herself, which I'll be trying to avoid. The other things that you're going to see is a honorable mentions list. So we're going to go ahead and do an honorable mentions list for all the games that I think could have potentially been in the top 10, but we're just a little shy of it. And then next up, we're going to be doing the actual top 10 list itself. And you can see Serenity is gunning to play some games right now. So without further ado, let's get into the honorable mentions. Alright, so for the very first honorable mention for the top 10 solo card games is Legendary Encounters, an alien deck building game. It was created in 2014 and was published by Upper Deck Entertainment. This one is a very, very good solo game. It didn't make it into my top 10, and that's mainly because I'm just not as much as crazy about the IP as some people are. However, if you are into the Alien series of movies, this is going to be right up your alley, and obviously just that alone is going to push this higher up, as most IP-based games do. This is a very, very well done solo game. So the mechanics within the game are really well done. You can see here, I'm showing you straight from the Board Game Geek site. You can see right away that the overall ranking for this particular game is 88 and thematically listed at 22. I love games that have a really high ranking thematically, and this one definitely does. But again, as I mentioned, the IP for me isn't my type of game. It just doesn't invoke any real excitement for me, but I could absolutely see how if somebody was into the Alien background, the lore, the movies, all that kind of stuff, you are going to gobble this up. So this is really, really cool. I'll show you a quick glimpse here of the description down below. So it does say Legendary Encounters, an alien deck building game, is based on the 4 movies. As I already mentioned, it's fully cooperative. So again, solo plays in there for sure. It's a deck building game in the same family as the Marvel deck building game as well. This is the breakdown of what you get within the product. So 600 total original art card set, as well as the game board, rulebook, that type of thing. In terms of classifications, it's got itself in the card game family, fighting, horror, all that good stuff, science fiction, of course. Mechanically, it's got card drafting, cooperative play, deck and pool building, partnerships, player elimination, and variable player powers. So this is a really, really cool game, and the reason I wanted to mention it is because I have played it with friends. I've never, ever owned it personally myself, but I would never put something on a list that I haven't thoroughly played already. So I played this one with friends. My friend had a copy of this one, and we played this quite a few times, but my friend was more into it than I was, so I was playing it more so to appease him, and I wasn't as much into the IP or the theme myself, but then I was able to take it once we played it a couple times and ripped through a bunch played solo, and I actually enjoyed it just a little bit more than I did playing 2-player. The only thing I noticed, though, is that, again, the IP for me just didn't grip me enough. So this is why this game, for me, sits in the honorable mentions, not for any other reason. If you guys, like I said before, love the IP of the Alien series, then this would potentially jump this one up into your top 10. So I'm really interested to hear in the comments below if you guys really, if you're one of the people that really enjoy this one, where it sits in your top 10. And we'll talk more about that as we go through these lists, because I'm going to ask you at the very end of this for a couple things I'd like to hear back from you guys. So that's basically going to wrap up the first entry into the honorable mentions for this top 10 solo card game list. All right, so the next entry in the honorable mentions for the top 10 solo card games is Palm Island. Now, this one I am excited to talk about, and I can see why some of you guys might be wondering, why is this on the honorable mentions list? This should be in a top 10 list. Well, the reason is because as of this list being released, this game currently hasn't been officially released just yet. So it definitely deserves an honorable mention in my opinion, and I've played this one thoroughly many times using the prototype that was sent to me for the Kickstarter. I thoroughly enjoyed what I got out of just the base game solo play, but what I'm really interested to see is how feats and things like that are really going to spice the game up, as well as everything that got unlocked and added in as part of the Kickstarter. This one was created by John Metling. Portal Dragon is the publisher, as you can see here on the screen. I am on BGG currently, but I'm also showing you some actual gameplay footage of me playing through Palm Island as well, so you're seeing that as I talk through this one. So I really enjoyed this. I played an 8-round game, and I also showed you guys a setup video on the channel. So if you are interested in more information on this one, go check those out. But the thing that really captured me about Palm Island and its mechanisms and how the game plays is the fact that you simply just need your two hands. And you can literally play this anywhere. So you don't need a table, although having just the tiniest bit of a table could be useful in certain situations, but you really don't need it. The game is called Palm Island for a reason. It's a fantastically well-designed game in that you're constantly acquiring resources, handling resource management in your hand, spending them when you use them. You can upgrade different cards in your hand, which then give you better resources later. And if you're doing it in a smart way, if you're kind of starting to memorize the pattern of when cards are coming up and what's coming up soon and what you need to save for, you can really build up quite the combo of resource gathering, resource management / cashing that in for the most points you possibly can to get the highest amount of your total points at the end of the game. And that's really what you're gunning for in the solo play, is you're basically being ranked against different categories of how successful you are based on your total score. So this one was really fun, and I definitely endorsed this one when it was on Kickstarter. I played through it. I really enjoyed it, and I think it fills a small portion of my gaming hobby where I need something that is quick and something that's easy to teach and something I could throw at somebody to say, hey, like, you've never tried solo gaming before. Would you like to give Palm Island a try? I've actually had a couple friends take a look at the prototype that I was sent for the Kickstarter, and they actually enjoyed it, and they were able to play it in front of me. I kind of showed them how it worked, and they said, yeah, I could see myself really getting into this one. And that's what was really cool, was seeing other people picking it up, playing it, and really understanding it very quickly, because it's not one of those games you're going to get lost in the rules. It does have a lot to offer. Once you do a brief skim of the game rules, you really get an understanding after a few rounds through of the game. You start picking up on the strategy within it, and it's very cleverly designed. So this one is highly rated, but does sit in the honorable mention section because I haven't seen the production copy yet. However, when I do see that production copy, I may potentially be bumping this one further, or at least potentially bumping it into the top 10 list. We'll see, because there are some serious contenders in that top 10 list that are established or very new, or just extremely popular. So Palm Island has some, it has potential to get into that top 10 spot, but for now, at this current date in time, it sits as an honorable mention and an absolute 100% recommendation. Let's get started. So, starting off here in the number 10 position for the top 10 solo card games is One Deck Dungeon 2016, designer Chris Cheslick and publisher Asmodee Games. This is a really solid number 10 entry and one that I really enjoy. I have not done this one on the channel yet, and I kind of feel bad about that because this one's one that would not take me that much time to play through, and it's something that I honestly need to do. This one I've really enjoyed a lot off camera. It's a quick, clever game, and once you get the gist of how things are moving and flowing within the game of One Deck Dungeon, which is essentially has you traversing through and leveling through a number of deck shuffles per level. So essentially you have a deck of cards. They have kind of a door background, as you can see, like this. The deck looks like this and has these doors on the back of them. There's a stack of them. You're going to go through that once. That's going to get you to the next level. You go through it again, level 2, next, and you go through the deck again, level 3. And essentially you're burning through a deck to go up in level. And then finally, when you get to that last level, you're going to then move to the boss and you're going to fight the boss. So the cool thing is, as you go ahead and encounter different things in One Deck Dungeon, the really cool part about it is how you acquire, or once you defeat something, how you can actually use the card that you've defeated to improve your character. So essentially you're going to be able to use the top portion of the card, the side portion of the card, or the bottom portion of the card to either add a skill to your character or potentially add some more dice to your character or just get some straight XP. And it's going to have you manipulating a pool of dice that you have, as you can kind of see here as an example. There's a bunch of dice underneath. Now this is more of an individual this person is fighting against is a dragon, but essentially you'd have a pool of dice that you're rolling, which is based on your character's dashboard, as well as whatever skills or extra abilities have been added to your character. So the cool thing is there's a lot of manipulation of the dice. So there, yes, it is a dice chucker, so there's obviously going to be some random elements there. So for those of you that are adverse to that, that might put you off this one. But the cool thing is you have full control, in a sense, as you level your character up, as well as defeat encounters and creatures and things like that. You go through the dungeon, you can start to build your character in a way that works best for you, which means manipulating that dice pool by potentially trading dice out to gain different dice, or not even focusing on that and going for XP. It's kind of open door to you to decide how you want to go about it. I'm not going to go into too much more detail on this one because I don't have live gameplay to show you of this one, but this is something that I definitely need to get to the table at some point. So if you guys are interested in seeing a playthrough of One Deck Dungeon, I'd be really happy to do this one. So let me know in the comments below. I think we'd have a ton of fun playing through this. Just so you guys know as well, this is not the only entry of One Deck Dungeon. If you go take a quick look at Board Game Geek, you'll see there is a Forest of Shadows that came out in 2017. So this game has and will be and continues to have additions added to it. And solo gamers are really enjoying this one. So I think it's a really solid number 10 on the top 10 solo card game list. All right, coming in at number 9 on the top 10 solo card games is Pathfinder, the Adventure Card Game Series. And I'm going to say series because there is a bunch of these games. This one that you're seeing currently on screen is the base set for Rise of the Runelords, which is the very first entry into the Pathfinder Adventure Card Game Series. The reason this is on the list is because this was my third game ever playing solo. So I had 2 games prior to this. That was Mage Knight and Lord of the Rings, the card game. So those 2 were my very first entries into solo gaming. I played them heavily, and then I moved into Pathfinder. I really did enjoy Pathfinder for what it gave to me as a solo player, and that was heavy character progression. Now, Mage Knight obviously has character progression in it as well, and it's very heavy because you go from being very weak to very powerful very quickly. But Pathfinder had a little bit more of a slow progression, and it happened over multiple plays, 30-something plays, I think. And we might have we've played this, or I've played this not only with my game group, but solo, like 30 to 50 times easily on the base box, the original one. So that would be this base set. When you get the game, it looks like this on the inside. Essentially, you're going to get a whole bunch of cards. They're easily categorized. The insert's fantastic because it allows space for everything. If you start sleeving things, it gets a little tight and it's tougher. but if you leave things just as cards alone, you can fit everything in here. You basically get one free adventure pack inside the base box, which will, of course, once you complete the intro scenarios of your campaign, and you move into and you open this pack up, and it adds a bunch of cards to add into your other stuff. But you'll also notice here, if I increase the size of this, that there's actually quite a few slots here for other expansions. So this is the first one. There's 5 more to buy for a total of 6 that all can sit inside the original base box. And the whole point behind this is that you basically are buying a campaign experience in a box. An RPG in a card game is essentially what you're buying. You're going to go ahead, you're going to pick your character. Your character's going to have stats like this: D6 for strength, D6 for constitution, and as you go through these decks that are going to be laid out per scenario in the middle of the table, so it'll look like this somewhat. So this is an example of some individuals playing the game. There might be some locations out there that you have to go to, so there's decks that you're going to have to draw from if you decide to bring your character. So these actually are representations of your characters. You may say, oh, I'm moving my character to the market. You pull a card from the market deck, you see what happens. It might be good, it might be bad, you might have to fight it, it might be something you acquire, but you eventually will be rolling dice just like you would in an RPG. The whole cool thing about this game is that it's really your life is your deck. So we see this now all over the place, but back when this game first came out, it wasn't as rampant as it is now to have your deck be your life in card games. But I can tell you nowadays, with the new, like within the last 5 to 6 years, this has been used in games a lot now, that when you play these deck building games or games where you play a card game, that your deck ends up being your life. And back then when Pathfinder first came out with the base set, this was it wasn't a brand new concept, but it was very, very cool. And I think it drew a lot of people in and made people go, so this is like how I'm going to handle my character. And if I deplete my character's deck completely, then I'm dead and I'm out of the scenario. So you have to be really wise with what cards you use, when you use them, all that good stuff. So anyway, this was a really, really cool one. What I do want to say, the disclaimer I want to say with this one is it sits on the number 9 on my list because of the fact I do think it's a fantastic solo game experience to get into. But one thing I will say is that if you are an experienced solo player who has played, I would say anything from my top 7, which we haven't got to yet in this list, and up to the first position. So in a few moments here, we're going to be going through the rest of my list. If you happen to have played, say, the majority, if not all, of the top 7 of my top 10 that I'm about to list off, then you might want to reconsider jumping, or you might not want to jump into Pathfinder Adventure Card Game. And I say that because some of the ones higher up on this list have taken what this game has done and not essentially redone it in a different way, but they've used certain mechanisms and they've done it in a better way. So you're going to find that some of the newer card games that are out there within the last 5 years or so have taken and learned from games like this in the past and have built on it, and you might get a better experience somewhere else. But if you're a new solo gamer and Pathfinder is your thing because you're really into the world, and that's one of the biggest draws for me, was that this card game is built on an RPG that's extremely successful, well known. And so it's very easy to get your mind wrapped into the world and get invested in it. And I find that's hard with a lot of games these days, where you'll get a one-shot game like One Deck Dungeon we just talked about in the 10th position. It comes out, it's fantastic, but you have to learn to love it because the lore's not there. The lore's in the game that you just purchased, and that's all there is. You have to get into that lore for that particular game, and you hope that it works. But with Pathfinder, you know that there's this huge world that's already been created. People have been playing role-playing games in it for many, many years, and it's well established, and it's not like you're jumping into something that was just created yesterday. This thing is fully flushed out. So that was one of the biggest reasons that drew me into the game, was knowing how strong of a backbone in lore the game had. And that was cool. So that's really something to think about. And again, if you're a super experienced solo player, this might be one you go, I don't know. But if you are a super experienced solo player, you've probably heard of this one already, probably played it and either enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it, depending on your preferences. I personally enjoyed it from the character progression standpoint. I didn't see the scenarios themselves as being as interesting as other games and how they do them for a card game, but I found that the character progression in this game was awesome. I really liked how my character was building up and getting stronger over time like a role-playing game, but also had to manage and have a lot of hand management, managing my character's life in the form of cards. That was really cool. So Pathfinder Adventure card game, there's a ton of them. So what I'll do really quick is I'm going to show you guys how outrageous this is, because there is a lot. If you search Pathfinder on Board Game Geek, after it loads here for a few seconds, you're going to see a ton of stuff. So it's a mess. There's so much stuff. But it's very easy to figure it out. Essentially, you've got 3 major base sets. So if you are interested in checking this out, you've got Rise of the Runelords, was the first one that came out in 2013. Just take a look down the list and you'll see that there's these things called adventure decks. You're just looking for the same one that matches the base set. So in this case, if you were to buy this, which is the base set, you also get inside of it the Adventure Deck 1 for free, as I showed you in the picture earlier. Then you can see right here, this would be Adventure Deck 2. So you'd add that into this same base set. You go buy 3, you add this into the base set, you go find 4, you add it in, blah, 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 all the way until you've got all 6. Your campaign completes, and then you can move on to the next base set. There's also nothing saying that you have to do these in order. You can buy Wrath the Righteous, which is the most newest entry into their series. And if it was my choice, I would actually choose to go straight to this one. I wouldn't say go to Rise and then go to Skull and then go to Wrath. I would say go right to Wrath, because by the third one, they've really hit their stride. They've worked out kinks. Things have gotten better. The scenarios have gotten more clever. And I would say Wrath of Righteous is where you want to start. Don't work your way backwards. I think only having one iteration of this is probably good enough. And the other thing to note, guys, is that if you are interested in playing the older ones, you can go the digital route, because they have created these in a digital space, and you can actually go ahead and play them for free to start in the apps. They're on iOS and Android. And then if you like them so much, you can buy them digitally, and they cost a heck of a lot less. Now, I know this is a top 10 solo card game list, so you might be already grinding your teeth going, that's not right, those are digital. That's right, it isn't right, they are digital. I'm a horrible person, and it's very true. But I would recommend, if you're going to get one of these 3 base boxes, buy the physical version of Wrath of the Righteous and collect that one if you're going to get this game. And then go from there. And then if you want to play Rise of the Runelords or any of the other ones, just go the digital route on those ones, because they're older and you'll get them for cheaper, and you won't be burning that much money to acquire them all. Plus, you can play them wherever you want, and it's convenient. But Wrath and Righteous it'd be pretty cool. That's the only one I haven't played. I've played the other 2, but I know Skull and Shackles improved a lot on what Rise of the Runelords did, so I can only imagine that Wrath actually did better. So if I take a look right here, it looks like Rise of the Runelords is rated 7.3. If I go into this and I say Skull and Shackles, let's take a look and see how much it was rated. So it jumped up a little bit on the ratings, and ratings aren't everything, but you can see, I mean, they're increasing, so that's good. Whenever something's increasing, it's meaning the general population is enjoying it more. And I go to Wrath, and it's 7.6. So you can see, like, things are getting better as with each iteration, and the weight of it's decent. It's actually over average on the complexity rating. So anyway, that is enough for my number 9 position. I think we talked enough about it, but I thought I would give it some extra time, because this is there's so much content to this one. But you can see customizable level 29. It's if you like customizable card games, this is a really good one, and thematically strong because of its super strong backbone in the RPG landscape. So that is my number 9, Pathfinder, the adventure card game. All right, so coming in at the 8th position on the top 10 solo card games is Elder Sign. Now, man, is there ever a ton of expansions for this one. So I'm just going to quickly show you guys here on Board Game Geek the amount of expansions here. It's quite large. Unseen Forces is one, Gates of Arkham, Omens of Ice, Omens of the Deep came out in 2017. There's some promo cards and other things. I believe this game is still getting content. Omens of the Pharaoh, 2018. So Lots of content to pick from for Elder Sign, and if you're wondering whether and how well this plays solo, if you go here and click on the community tab, you can actually see the community itself has rated that and highly recommended that a large majority think that the solo play in this one is really, really good. There are some people that don't recommend it, and that's sometimes the case because some people just don't believe the solo play is as good as cooperatively in this particular case, because Elder Sign is a game that you typically are cooperatively trying to take down a particular ancient, but in this particular case, solo play is available because you can play multiple characters if you want to, or you can just go with one. But it's really, really cool. I really enjoyed this one. I would say that this one deserves to be on the list simply because it is a ton of cards. It's based in H.P. Lovecraft's world again. It's another Cthulhu-based game, so that's going to put some people off because some people don't like that theme, and if that's the case, then this one will be skippable on your list, but there is a ton of solo gamers that really, really do enjoy this one, and it's definitely worth checking out. This game does have lots of dice rolling in it, so when you go into this one, it's going to be like most Cthulhu games, but in terms of the scale and how much real estate it takes up on the table, it's not as bad. So you're talking Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror, all those types of games, they just take up a ton of space. As a card game, this is really cool because everything's pretty compact for the most part. Even here in this particular picture, you can tell if you took the playmat out and you really crunch things together, it wouldn't take up that much space. That's actually a relatively small table this individual is using to play this game on, but I imagine with most Cthulhu games, of course, as the expansions pile up, then the content increases. So this is one that I'm not going to go into too much depth on this one because it's been around for a while. It's been out since 2011, and if you're interested in it, there's actually quite a number of really good videos as well as content in the forums you can find about this particular one. I own this one. I used to play it a lot, and then I sold it because I found better versions of this game, particularly well, I don't want to spoil things, but I've got technically Mansions of Madness, for instance, Eldritch Horror, even Arkham Horror, the original board game I liked more. So this being a card-based solo list, this definitely deserves to be on it. And it's also been around for so long that, to be completely honest, this one was tough to even leave on there. I was almost tempted to retire this one, and I think I probably will. So what we'll probably end up doing, and I'm just thinking about this now, but I think what I'm going to do is this will stay on this list for now, but I think I'm going to be retiring this one based on the fact of how long it's been out and how highly recommended it's been as for solo play for so many years. So this is going to transition after the release of this video to the Hall of Fame, because I think this is a game that has established itself and there is a huge following behind it. There's a ton of people that recommend this thing through solo gaming forums as a really good entryway into Cthulhu, because a lot of people don't want to go spend and buy the big box stuff. It's just tons and tons of content. This is a good way to get into it on a smaller scale and see whether it's your thing or not. Plus the solo element there is really strong. So again, as you can see here in the description, this basically describes it. So Elder Sign's a fast-paced cooperative dice game. So again, solo playable is there. Of supernatural intrigue for 1 to 8 players by these individuals and the designers of Arkham Horror, the card game, or Arkham Horror, sorry, the board game. Players take the roles of investigators racing against time to stave off the imminent return of the Ancient One. So the Ancient One's coming back, and you're trying to stop the Ancient One from devouring everything. Almost kind of similar to most Cthulhu-based games. The players are going to take the roles of investigator racing against time. To do that, you're armed with tools. You've got allies. You got some occult knowledge that you're going to gain. You're going to be putting your sanity to the test and stuff like this. You're trying to get Elder symbols, which will be used to essentially seal the Ancient One away, and that's how you win the game. It says right here in the description, very clean cut, easy to see. So I've already gone over these: modular board, dice rolling, cooperative play. They fit into these types of mechanisms. There's a large number of really good images if you want to check it out here in the section to see. You can see someone's actually quite terrified to play this. But there's tons of people playing this. It's been around for ages, and there's a lot of people that love it. So again, it used to be part of my collection. I used to play it a lot. I used to love it a lot. I moved on past it and found better games and you'll see more of that to come. But this sits in my list at a very solid 8. But as I mentioned, as of this video, at this moment right now, I am going to be retiring this to the Hall of Fame. This is never again going to be, as I normally do with any of these games that are put into the Hall of Fame, will never again be on another top 10 list. They will be mentioned as a Hall of Fame entry for a particular list if it applies. So for instance, if we happen to do a top 10 Cthulhu-based game, this will probably be on it, but this game will just be mentioned as a Hall of Fame game. It won't actually take up a spot on that top 10. So that's going to wrap up position number 8 for the top 10 solo card games. Coming in at number 7 on the top 10 solo card games is Gloom of Kilforth, a fantasy quest game. Now, this game hit Kickstarter in 2016, 2017. It was running around that time frame. And this one really, really took off. And this was based on a project that Tristan Hall, the designer, had been working on kind of on his own for about 8 to 10 years. He had been working on this, so basically around a decade or so. I mean, that includes this Kickstarter as well to fruition and things like that. But this is one that absolutely needs to be checked out. Not only is the gameplay extremely fun and engaging, and he's built something truly special with this game for solo players, but the artwork is second to none. It is so nice. I can't even describe it. I have to show you guys an example. So this is one of the cards here. This one here is not one of the cards from the game. This one is. So I think this was maybe some concept art at the beginning. But you can see here, like if I click on this, there you go. So like the artwork is really, really nice. It's one of the biggest draws of the game. But the cool thing is that typically games that look really, really good don't always follow up with fantastic gameplay as well. Sometimes games look better than they actually play. This is not one of those cases. The artwork really does gel and mesh with the gameplay that's in this game, and Tristan's really, really good at taking feedback back after he did his first run through on his Kickstarter and making corrections where individuals that have played his game have given him feedback on how to improve the game and make it even better, and he's gone ahead and implemented those into his most recent Kickstarter here. And he has just recently completed that Kickstarter and is now in the stages of production and things like that. So people are looking forward to getting that next one. So if I go like here, for instance, and we go Gloom of Kilforth, you'll see that this is actually going to bring up a number of things, and that is the Encounters expansion pack. So this is something that is coming with the next Kickstarter, but essentially it was a reprint of the original as well. So this is a really good game. So like in terms of solo play, the community rated it the best way to play is solo. And so that's always awesome. And of course, it's a card-based game through and through. There's not a single, it's just solid cards, tokens, that type of thing. So here's the description. If you want to take a look through this, you can also go to Board Game Geek, as I am right now, in order to check this out. You can also watch, and you're seeing on screen currently, I'm playing through the game as well, because I did do a showcase of this game, so you're able to actually watch me play this all the way through and see whether this is something for you. If you happen to not be able to jump in on a late pledge for this game, or it's too late in the game for that, you can always contact Tristan Hall through Board Game Geek and see whether or not there's some way to make that work, or you can wait until likely a future Kickstarter comes out for him where you can add in some of his other games. So essentially here the description of this particular game says, the land of Kilforth is a perilous domain filled with nefarious monsters, mysterious strangers, and treacherous locations, and dominated at its center by the Sprawl, which is a huge city where the intrepid heroes begin their journey to fame and fortune. So the land has various factions that are vying for power over each other. And presiding over the world outside Kilforth is the ever-present Overlord. Over the coming month, a deadly gloom will descend upon Kilforth, which the heroes must battle through to prove their worth, defeat an ancient evil, and save the land from darkness. So that's really what's going on in the game, is that there's all these location cards laid out everywhere, You're likely seeing that right now, and those location cards are flipped from their kind of happy side, which is essentially their normal side, to their gloom side. And as the land basically gets covered in more and more gloom, things start going downhill quick. But your whole goal is to power up your character to the point where you can actually complete your quest that you're trying to go on, and then be strong enough to actually encounter the Ancient and defeat the Ancient. And if you want to see how that plays out from start to end, as I mentioned, I do have games, or I should say, I do have videos on my channel, a full showcase from start to finish. So you can check out not only the unboxing, but you can see the solo setup, the rules overview, a full playthrough, all the way to the end. It's a really great game. I highly recommend you check this one out. Whether you are a new gamer or an experienced gamer, this is going to give you something that other card games do not have. Again, it's hard to compare so many different card games and how they all handle things, but this really is a unique system. And it's a really cool one because I think the ability to expand upon it is definitely there. There's lots of potential. So a solid number 7, Gloom of Kilforth, a fantasy quest game. Next up on our top 10 solo card game list is Aeon's End at number 6. Now, this one's really, really awesome, and it's well designed all the way through. This one was designed by Kevin Riley, and Action Phase Games and Indie Boards and Cards are the publishers for this particular game. And it's not just for Aeon's End. This is also in the 6th position as well for Aeon's End War Eternal. Both of those games are standalone games that you can get to play within this world, this deck building world. It's amazing. It has some really cool hand management, and the deck building itself is actually really unique than most deck builders out there. And I really do enjoy the planning as you discard and use cards. So first up, the idea behind this game, as you can see on the screen here, and you're probably likely seeing some actual playthrough of me playing through the game as well. I'm just going to go through a description of the game so you guys understand what this game's all about if you've never heard of it before. So the survivors of a long ago invasion have taken refuge in the forgotten city of Gravehold, and there the desperate remnants of society have learned that the energy of the very breaches of the beings are using to attack them can be repurposed through various gems, transforming the energies into beneficial spells and weapons to aid in their last line of defense. And that's what the Breach Mages are doing, and that's what you will be if you pick up this particular game or the War Eternal version. So essentially there is you're going to go ahead, choose your Breach Mage you'd like to use. They're going to start you off with a set of cards that's specific to the Breach Mage you've chosen, and you're going to have kind of a side area market, essentially, where you're going to be basically gathering ether through your hand in order to spend in this side pool in order to deck build your way into defeating a nemesis which you've chosen that is basically trying to destroy Gravehold, which is the city, this underground forgotten city. So that's kind of the theme behind it. So there's 2 ways to lose in this particular game. If the nemesis tokens that are on the nemesis are fully removed, you lose. If you actually both of your characters are killed off, of course, you lose. The way you win in the game is if you can actually go through the nemesis deck and deplete it to nothing, you win. Or if you actually take the nemesis down in terms of health, you can win. So there's a few different ways to win and lose, and throughout the game you're going to be managing kind of how you go about that. So some things and encounters that will come up against you, minions, they're going to target Gravehold. They're going to try to attack it and knock its health down. You can kind of see here that there's, even on screen now, you'll likely be able to see some of the dials. Those dials, one is for Gravehold, looks like a city. The other has one of the monsters from Aeon's End in it, and that's what's used for the Nemesis. The game's really well designed, and the coolest factor for me in this game that I really found unique and interesting was the idea that when you're playing cards in this particular game, you're not just playing them and discarding them as you would in most games of this type. But what you're actually doing in this card game is, as you discard cards based on a number of cards you've discarded during your turn, you can put them back in that discard pile in any order you choose. And so by doing so, of course, unless there's a game mechanic that happens to tell you where it needs to be put, but regardless of that, in the general sense, you're able to put your discarded cards back in any order you choose, which really what allows you to do is not only have fun planning the current turn that you're on, but also planning how essentially your reserve deck or discarded deck will eventually become your deck where you're pulling your new cards from. So the cool thing is you're not shuffling your discard deck. Once you've run out of draw cards, that discard deck that you've now layered in a way that you like based on the cards you've discarded over time while playing them, you just simply flip the whole deck over face up. No shuffling required, and you start drawing from the top. What's really cool and unique about this is that if you're smart, you can actually essentially set up some pretty nasty combos inside the deck, knowing full well that they're going to come out in a particular order. And that's what I really like about the game, is that you'll go through your turn. You may use 3 cards on your turn, say, and those 3 cards may get discarded. You can choose which ones you want in which position and stuff like that. And then later on, when you see one of those cards come through, you're going to remember a little bit about those ones you discarded at that point and know what's coming. And you can also plan for things. So it's really interesting. Aeon's End, the base game, came out in 2016. There's also, as you can see here, there's an Aeon's End War Eternal. So you're seeing currently gameplay of War Eternal, but one thing I did want to let you guys know of is that on the channel currently right now, as of the release of this video, I am doing a giveaway for Aeon's End, which is the base game. So if you have never played this game before and you don't own it and you're looking to pick it up, I have one that I'm giving away on the channel. So just check the description. There'll be a link to that giveaway if you want to jump in on it, and all you need to be is a subscriber of the channel. That's it. That's all you need to be in order to get in on the giveaway, and you'll have a chance to win. This is a fantastic card game and fantastic solo game. Has so many unique nemesis that also bring in, each one of them brings in its own set of new mechanics that are going to force you to use heavy strategy in order to defeat them. The first couple are very easy. They kind of get you into the game, and then as you progress, the nemesis become more nasty, and each one of them can actually be buffed up to a higher level where it's even tougher to fight them, so you can kind of play on a normal level or a hard version, essentially. This is a high recommendation for me and easily sits as a solid number 6 on the top 10 solo card games. All right, moving on to number 5. The top 10 solo card games is Shadowrun Crossfire. Now, this game is dripping with theme. I love the look, feel, and everything about this one. This is such a fun game. Now, I used to play this a ton back when it first came out in 2014. I really enjoyed it, but haven't played it recently all that much. Now, the reason for that is because there has been rumors over the past 6 months to about a year that Shadowrun Crossfire is potentially, or is, getting a reprint, and that reprint may not be just a standard reprint. It may be a whole new edition. I could be completely wrong on that. I've tried to look things up and found differing opinions on things because I don't think everything is fully flushed out just yet. But if anyone happens to know and wants to let me know in the comments below whether it's going to be a second edition or just a straight reprint, what I have heard is that with the successful re-implementation of a game called Dragonfire, which essentially takes and builds off of what Shadowrun Crossfire created as a fantastic deck building card game, they're basically looking to take this older version of that and re-up it for current day and maybe make some rule changes as well as mechanism changes, things like that, in order to bring it up to today's standards. So the interesting part is I'm not 100% aware what those are, so I do apologize for that. This does deserve a spot on the list, and if you can get this at a cheap price, I would recommend picking it up. If this is something you can find secondhand, I wouldn't recommend going to eBay or anything like that, because there are some individuals that are charging outrageous prices for this because it is difficult to find any version of this in stores, as I believe all printing has ceased on this for quite some time. So I don't currently have this in my collection anymore, but now that I've heard rumors from past months that there is going to be a reprint or a re-implementation of this one, I'm really excited. So you're not seeing any gameplay, you're just sitting here seeing me on Board Game Geek because I don't have a run through of this particular one just yet because I do not own the original. But I would recommend, if you're a solo gamer looking for a card game that has great deck building mechanics, then Shadowrun Crossfire is something you want to check out to see if it's interesting to you. As you can see on the screen, there's a description here. It says, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it because, again, I don't have the game in front of me, but it says, the shadows of the Sixth World have every kind of danger you can imagine. Ultra violent gangers, flesh-eating ghouls, mages that summon spirits from toxic waste, backstabbing corporate raiders, hard-nosed police officers, and even dragons. You don't have much, mainly your guts, your wits, and your friends, but maybe that's enough. Between you and your teammates, you can sling spells, hack the Matrix, talk a tiger out of his stripes, and bring down a charging orc. I don't know if that orc is actually spelled correctly, but we'll go with it. From 100 yards away. Will that be enough to face down the worst the mean streets can throw at you? You're about to find out. So it says right below it there, I'm not going to read that whole thing, but essentially you can play this one solo. It's gritty, cyberpunk, fantasy world. That's kind of what you're looking at with this one. And you're basically playing as a Shadowrunner team, taking on tough jobs such as protecting clients who are marked for death, shooting your way to downtown, facing dragons. You're going to try to improve your deck. The cool thing is when you go to the market in this game, or the black market deck, essentially, there's not only a black market deck, there's two obstacle decks, crossfire deck, mission sheets, roll cards, all that good stuff. When you go to the black market deck and get something in this game, the cool thing is it goes into your hand, and because of that, it allows for interesting deck building mechanics because you're actually acquiring cards into your hand, which is very, very different than most deck builders. And that's one of the major reasons why I really liked it, was like if you're going after something, it immediately comes in your hand and can be used during that current round. So that's really, really cool. So again, that essentially, I'm not going to go into big detail on this because things may change with this. This game may not play the same way that I'm used to it playing from years ago. For those of you that are more familiar with what has happened with it recently or any news that has come out about the reprint slash second edition, whichever way they're going on that one, please let me know in the comments below. But I would highly recommend that you guys check this out, as you're not going to find this retail, and if you do, you're very lucky. I found it very hard here in Canada to get my hands on this one. It seems to be sold out everywhere, as I don't believe there's any more printing being done on this, but someone can let me know if I'm mistaken on that. But based on the news that something new is coming, I'm not going to purchase anything until they get that next version out. And I'm really looking forward to it. So as a solid number 5 on the top 10 solo card games, Shadowrun Crossfire. Coming in at number 4 on the top 10 solo card games is Dragonfire. This game is extremely cool, and as we just talked about in the prior entry, Shadowrun Crossfire, this is the re-implementation of that game. So, in essence, this is built upon what Shadowrun Crossfire did originally, and this game, Dragonfire, came out in 2017, so that was last year. It was very popular when it dropped and was published by Catalyst Game Labs. The designer is Randall N. Bills, and this is a really, really cool game. I can tell you guys from the artwork alone, this is what attracted me initially until I found out this was a re-implementation of Shadowrun Crossfire. Then I got really excited. I picked this game up and I've been playing it off camera. So the brutal thing is that this is one of the games that I've really wanted to get to the channel in a showcase, and it is coming. I want to let you guys know that. However, I'm trying to get as many plays in as I can to even kind of get an even better understanding of the system itself. But essentially, you can see here that you're going to be falling into what's typically set as a Dungeon and Dragons world. That's where this whole game is based in. So again, similar to with Pathfinder, where Pathfinder the card game had the Pathfinder universe to set all of its content in, Dragonfire is pulling from Dungeons and Dragons, which has a wealth of back history, story, and success. So what's really cool about this is that if you're familiar with any Dungeons and Dragons material whatsoever, then you're going to feel right at home with Dragonfire in terms of theme, presentation, artwork, all that kind of stuff is going to hit the mark. In terms of the game itself, the game's mechanisms are very, very cool. You got like card drafting, deck pool building, hand management, all that kind of stuff. It's a cooperative game, but can absolutely be played solo. You can see here, if you click on how you can play the game, essentially, it's actually quite funny. And this is actually one that I looked at and was like, this is kind of strange, but for some strange reason on the vote count for BGG, they actually say that it's not recommended to play solo, but I completely disagree with that. You can completely play this solo and it can be a blast. Really what's going to end up happening with Dragonfire is you're going to start out and you're going to be, you're really gunning for XP. The whole game is about expanding your character, and you're going to see here, if I can get to a decent picture, that you're going to get a player board that looks something like this. or not like that because I haven't logged in, but essentially something like this. And there you go. Even there's a comment there by Michael Weber on Board Game Geek saying this looks very Shadowrun Crossfire-y. So that's kind of cool. And then they've also got the upgrade stickers here. So that's where they would go here. So as you're gaining experience and stuff like that, your character is gaining new abilities. That's allowing you to change up your deck. Or not change up your deck, sorry, but to basically enhance your characters and make them more powerful. Here's a better shot of the actual player boards here. So there's an example of an actual sticker sitting on this particular player board. So Pure Blood. It's really cool, and I really like it. So how the solo game works in this one is you actually have to, when you typically will play with 2 characters, although there's nothing wrong with you playing with 4. So there's 4 different, factions or colors in the game, essentially, and you're going to have a character per, so 1 blue, 1 green, 1 red, and stuff like that. So you're going to have all 4 of them. You can play all 4 hands, and you can play all 4 characters, but that's a lot to manage. The game allows you to actually take 2 of them and just place 2 of the colors on each of the 2 that you've chosen. So essentially each character represents 2 different colors. So I know, again, explaining this rather than showing it to you doesn't help as much, and I do apologize for that because I'm currently, like I said, I'm working towards doing a showcase on this one. So I want you guys to be aware that that is going to be coming, and then if you are interested in this one or you're on the fence, hopefully my videos and full showcase, as it normally does, will show the full picture of the game. Starting with, we've already done the unboxing, but of course we'll do a solo setup, a rules overview, and then a full playthrough. And so that they'll fill in all the gaps for you. There's also other videos out there in order to check out Dragonfire if you're interested right away in checking it out. But content is coming out for this. If you actually check it out on BGG, you can just simply type in, as I'm doing here, Dragonfire. You're going to get a list of stuff. I actually have some of these already. I have the character pack, so that's going to basically add in a bunch of characters into your game. So actually what I'll do here is I'm just going to type in Dragonfire, and I'm going to go right to the main thing here so we can see more. But there's the Dragonfire character pack. I have that. I also have this expansion here. I have Wondrous Treasures, if I'm not mistaken. I think I have that as well. And that adds a whole bunch of really cool treasures into the game. That's another thing that's really interesting about the game, is that you're deck building with cards and things like that, and as most deck builders are, you're just increasing the power of your cards. But there's weapons introduced in this that are so cool, and you can get these holographic cards within the game that actually have like a sheen to them, and when the light hits them, they just look super awesome. The quality of the cards is really good. You will not be disappointed. They did a really good job with the quality of it. The insert's good. So again, I've got a number of these already, and I've already been churning through a number of this stuff, but I'm not going to spoil anything here. So that's the fun thing with these top 10 lists, is that I want to let you guys know a little bit about the game, but until the showcase happens, I don't want to spoil too much. But I want to pique your interest and direct you towards this game, because I do think this is a winner, and I'm really looking forward to them expanding on the universe and as well as the mechanisms within the game. So you can see here down in the description, if you check it out for BGG for yourself, it's a cooperative deck building game. You're going to choose from a number of races, as I mentioned. You can choose from all the typical fantasy ones that you could possibly imagine. You're going to equip yourself with weapons, spells, magic items, and you're going to start at the Sword Coast. You expand all kinds of different places in the Forgotten Realms, and it's really cool. And this is the part that really got me. Things such as Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter, Waterdeep. These are places that I played video games in growing up. So this just got me super excited about the whole thing, because, well, D&D just has a lot of history with me. So, and the gameplay and what they've built in this is truly interesting. So, yes, this deserves to be on the top 10 solo card game list, and it currently sits at number 4. Coming in at number 3 is the Seventh Continent for the top 10 solo card games. This is such a winner of a system. This is an amazingly designed game. I am huge into story and theme, and this game just is like everything I could have wanted in a card game as a kid growing up. This is what I wanted. I wanted to be able to have that feeling of exploration, feel like I'm actually discovering something, feeling like the game could chew me up and spit me out any time. Also, just that feeling of tension constantly, knowing that you've been cursed essentially, and you need to find a way to get rid of the curse that you have. There's so much to explore and do in this game. I cannot rant and rave about this one enough. It deserves easily to be on the in the 3rd spot here on the top 10 list. As you can see, Currently, you're watching me play through the Seventh Continent, so I'm showing you some actual footage from my showcase that I did. So if you do and are interested now in this title for any reason, and I will be talking a little bit more about it before we move to the next one, this is a rank 4 on thematic in terms of Board Game Geek and an overall 12. So that's super, super high, and I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to climb the thematic one for sure. There's more content coming out for this, so Kickstarter backers are just starting to get their second print base copies delivered, and there's a lot of excitement around the game right now. I happen to be in on the very first one, so I got around the first time, which was really awesome to feel like I had kind of struck gold when I first got that one, and it was really fun to play through that with you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed it a lot, because I had tons of fun with this. So essentially, to get kind of into the meat of the game itself, I'll try to find a couple actual pictures here. Here's a great idea of just how many cards are in the game. Of course, that's not everything, but this game is a card game through and through. Not only are you building out a continent to explore on the table, but you're also using cards as your, really, in essence, hand management. You're really managing a deck of cards, which is essentially your life. And if you're playing with more than one player, then all of the players are sharing that deck. But for solo play, it's just you, and you're just managing this deck, trying to keep yourself alive. There's ways to regenerate that deck. You can sleep, you can camp, and all that kind of stuff, eat food. Those types of things will allow you to regenerate some cards back into your deck, but things are going to be discarded over time, and that is going to deplete. You're going to get hurt. There's like effects. There's also monsters that can enter the game, things like that. So it's got a little bit of everything. Here's an example of the actions you can take in the game. Now, this might overwhelm a lot of people. A lot of people might come into this looking at this for the first time if you've never heard of it and go, this just looks like a lot of actions. I really probably would take a long time to figure this out. This game is surprisingly intuitive. You will probably need, I would say, if you sat down, if you watch my rules overview video, first off, that would give you enough of a base to start by yourself. You could even, if you wanted to, watch my playthrough as well, and by then I think you would have a real good grasp on it. The actual number of actions shouldn't scare you in terms of how many different things you can do. All of it really just points to the theme. It's always trying to, these actions are essentially just bundled into the theme. So essentially, if you're at a mountain, well, the action would be to climb the mountain. So essentially, it's just something you're doing. The action truly is an action. It's just you're doing something, and they're just wording it in a way that makes sense in order to keep you attached to the theme and attached to the experience of what you're doing on the island. And so I think the way they design this not only allows for obscene amounts of expansion, because it's a card game that can unveil itself on your table. The other cool thing is they allowed for a save mechanism. So if you're playing this game, because they do rate this to be 1 to 1,000 minutes, which is a crazy amount of time. So you can play it slow, you can play it quick, however you want to. Although the first couple curses, I believe, took me quite some time to play. But still, the thing is, if you want to save it because you need to pack it up, you simply, there's a save system built into the game. And really what ends up happening is within a fog of war style kind of look down on your map, you're only going to care about the tiles that are closest to you. You're going to keep those tiles in a saved area. The rest of the tiles disappear, go back to the box, and next time when you restart the game, you're only going to rebuild the area that you were basically sitting in and the outlying areas just around you. So essentially, you can, build, take down to your heart's content, and not have to worry about leaving it on the table and consuming everything. However, if you want to, and you want to leave it on the table, this is one of those games that's fantastic to leave out because it would look amazing. And when I was playing it, I really liked the look of seeing this humongous sprawling continent sitting out on the table. Was really interesting to see, but not everyone has a table to do that. So the game allows for all kinds of exploration, and to be totally honest, I can't go into much of the detail because the more detail I go into, the more spoilers I get into. This is a game that you have to experience yourself. This is the kind of thing where if you're not going to purchase it, the best thing to do is to find someone who owns it or plans to buy it and try it. See if it's something that you'd like. But this is essentially it's kind of like a choose your own adventure built into a card game, but in the best possible way ever. And some people might say, you know what? If I want to do a choose your own adventure, I'll stick with a book. It's bound. I can bring it to bed, and it's easier. Yep, that's true. But I can tell you the immersion level with the artwork and the items and the curses and everything that's going on in this game, you are going to get sucked into this like there's no tomorrow. If you even have a little bit of an interest in choose your own adventure games, this is going to pull you away from a majority of your collection very quickly because you're going to always want to know what's behind that next card. The game does a really good job of, you move into a particular tile, there'll be alternate paths. You can go left, north, south, east, west. Of course, whichever direction you came into that tile from, you already know, but the others you don't. So it's always begging you for you to go a little longer, play a little bit more, see what happens. And of course, there is definitely a risk reward and a pressing your luck style to the game as well, where because you're trying to manage your deck and not die and not succumb to the curse, you are also trying to keep yourself up as the island basically takes its toll on you. And so you're managing your deck the entire time you're going through this, and you're going to make choices at times. Do you exert a certain number of cards that is used as energy essentially in order to try to succeed at something? So what you're seeing here in front of you is an example, and without it being placed out, because currently I'm showing something on screen, I'm showing you actual gameplay, so this may not line up right now with what I'm speaking about, but essentially if you wanted to do a check, say you wanted to climb a mountain, and the mountain said that you needed a certain number of successes or stars, or gold stars in the card, then essentially if it said 2, you need to get 2 successes. Whenever you draw cards from that deck, which is your life, you flip them up based on how many you choose, and you flip those up. You can't add more in after you've revealed, because then it would be cheating. You flip it up, and then you take a look at all the stars on the far left hand side of the card, and you try to connect as many as you can to make as many successes as possible. It's kind of equivalent to rolling a die without having a die, so it's kind of interesting in that respect. The dice in the game are actually used to show how many usages you have of a certain item. So if you build something like a pan pipe or a shovel, it might have a certain number of times you can use it before it breaks or breaks down. So I don't know, the design of this is just so smart. I gush on this one quite a bit, because in my mind there's nothing they can't do with this. They are really able to take this system and put any theme that they could ever possibly imagine on top of it, and it will be successful. And they could just keep changing the theme based on whatever's hot in the moment, and people would consume this like there's no tomorrow. As a solo gamer, this is a dream game. This is a game that will, very much like Gloomhaven, will suck you in, and you'll get lost. So this is a high recommendation, which is why it's sitting at 3, because I have played this for, I would say, hundreds of hours at this point, on camera and off camera, and I have absolutely no regrets whatsoever about backing this. And if I didn't own it currently and I just found this, I would think I just struck gold. That's as high of a recommendation as I could possibly give it. It's a great game. So it's a solid number 3 on the top 10 solo card games. Coming in at number 2 on the top 10 solo card games is Lord of the Rings, the card game. This is designed by Nate French and published by Fantasy Flight Games. This is a behemoth of a game. This is huge, and it has and was released in 2011 and has been running till now. Essentially, the release of this video still has expansions coming out for the game. One side of its expansions has completed, and that is the saga expansions. Those have actually ended, and those follow the books and movies. So if you're interested in kind of a continuing deck building experience that spans across all the saga expansions, you can just pick up expansion boxes, and there's 2 per movie essentially, or 2 per book, and you can go ahead and actually experience them, as well as there's even expansions for The Hobbit as well. So it's really cool. You can actually play from beginning to end and almost play the entire experience that we all have come to know and love through the books. Now, there's also alternative expansions with Lord of the Rings, the card games, and I'm going to jump to the Fantasy Flight site so you guys can see a little bit more about this, because I think this will give you more info than I can possibly understand. So as you can see, well, I understand it, but more information than you guys may be able to understand. So for those individuals that have never played this game before, and I'm probably talking to the majority of people that are new to this game, have never heard of it, there is a ton. And back when I first got into this was my second game that I ever got into solo, and I fell into the deep end of the pool pretty far. I collected literally almost everything on here I own. And it was not cheap. So there's a lot here. What you want to do is, you don't want to consume or buy everything. That's not the goal with this game. You can obtain it over time, and you can do it in a number of different ways, and there's tons of forums everywhere of people saying, how do I start with this, where do I begin? What I would say is, obviously the core set is the first place to begin. You can also pick up a second core set if you want to basically beef up your the card pool that you're drawing from, but I recommend against it until you start playing this a little bit further. So just stick with the one core box for now. It's more than enough to get you going, and really it's a nice to have that second core box, especially when you're starting out. It's not necessary. So pick up that core game. Once you do that, there's a number of different ways you can go. So you can go the Saga expansion route, or you can go the Deluxe expansion route. So all these other ones down here are not worth talking about just yet. But I'm actually going to talk about one of them in a few seconds. So deluxe expansions essentially are going to be expansions that are going to take you through adventures through particular places within Middle-earth and different time frames within the game. So some of them have to do with Khazad-dûm, some of them are going to be the Voice of Isengard, the Grey Havens, and all this kind of stuff. So they're going to take you to all kinds of different places, and of course they're going to expand your card pools for those locations, and those spheres of influence that are in the game are going to get bolstered by these particular expansions. So if you wanted to go to the store and you went to your store and potentially maybe 6 of these are out of stock, and there's only this one right here, the Wilds of if this particular expansion is the only one that's actually available to you, there's nothing wrong with jumping from the base game right to one of these at the end if you want to, but I would highly recommend that you take a look at these numbers right here beside the MEC, and you can actually see the release order of things. And I would actually follow that if you're trying to get into the game based on how they brought mechanics into the game. So what I mean by that is, in most games, you can just buy expansions willy-nilly, throw them in. What happened with Lord of the Rings essentially is, as it went along over time, there was obviously, as every game has, a core set of rules and principles that you had to understand how the game flowed. But then every expansion and adventure pack kept on bringing out more and more different unique mechanics or unique ways to play and manipulate the cards so that your scenario felt super unique to whatever it was you're doing, which is one of the reasons people love this game so much. It's not just content. You're not just getting more cards for a particular area and it's like, oh, that art looks nice. Yes, the art looks nice. It's actually, though, the scenarios themselves that have been developed to the point where this truly is a representation of whatever that scenario is on paper or in a card form. I can't stress that enough, and it's hard to explain through audio and even video here without actually showing you. And at some point, we will definitely be doing a Lord of the Rings playthrough showcase, because I've played this game for, I'd probably say, over 1,000 hours at this point easily, because I already told you guys I own a large majority of this, and I've been sucked in since this thing came out. So this game is just a fantastic game. But anyway, so going back to what you can buy. So you can go the deluxe expansion route if you want. If you pick a deluxe expansion, what ends up happening is you don't just buy Khazad-dûm and then go grab this one here. Like, don't grab, 2 different boxes. You got to think about it in turn. And this is where it gets weird and people get confused. If you pick whichever expansion you want, and again, would go on release order. So say you pick Khazad-dûm, a very highly recommended one. When you buy this one, you're going to get 3 scenarios in the box, as well as a bunch of cards to bolster your core game experience for your pool of cards you can draw from to build your decks to beat a scenario, which is what you're doing in this game, essentially, is building a deck to beat the scenarios. Once you buy this Khazad-dûm expansion, then you're going to roll down here to the cycles. So there's going to be cycles that are going to match each of these expansions. So some people are going to run out and go, oh, I'm going to buy Khazad-dûm, they're going to buy Heirs of Numenor, and I'm going to buy this and buy that. Don't do that. Buy Khazad-dûm, and then come down here, check out the Dworodelf cycle, and you'll see that the color of the actual cycle matches the expansion or the deluxe expansion that it associates itself with. And what it's doing is it's giving you an extended content for that expansion. So you're going to get 3 scenarios in this base game and a bunch of cards that are going to have to do mainly with dwarves and other things like that. And then you're going to start, and you're going to play through scenarios like this as they're released. So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And you can see that's where those numbers come from. Because why did it go from 8 to 17? Because it went from 8 down here to 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then it finished up, and 15 and 16 apparently are actually, there's a 15 and 16 somewhere in this huge pile before this expansion actually even released. So if you want to try to figure out where that is, it might be a standalone scenario. right? So you take a look around and you go, oh, okay, looks like this one was 15, so that could be one of them. Nightmare decks, that's a whole different ball game. So nightmare decks, essentially, if you want to know more about those, they make every scenario in the game way tougher. They're a lot cheaper, but they just give replayability because they beef the difficulty up to an obscene level. So anyway, what should you buy when you start? My recommendation would be, you've got the deluxe ones here. You can go that route. I would start with Khazad-dûm, do it in release order if you want to, and always grab this cycle first before you go to the next expansion so that you're continuing your story. Or you can go down the Saga expansion route, which is going to follow the exact, literally you're going to be following how the books and the movies played out. So you can see for for The Hobbit, there's two, Over the Hill, Under the Hill, and then or Overhill and Underhill, sorry, and then On the Doorstep, and then you're gonna start the actual Lord of the Rings, the movies, the trilogy, which is the Black Riders, The Road Darkens, is episode 1 essentially, so there's 1, 2, and 3. That's kind of how they broke them up. They put 2 expansions per book or movie essentially to cover it. So that's another way. And this has finished. So this actually has run its course to the end because there's nothing else past the Mountain of Fire. That is the end. So this is honestly, if you're going to get into the game and you don't want to go down the deluxe route because that's just going to cost you an obscene amount of money in the long run, these ones do not have these cycles. These cycles do not matter to the Saga expansions, and that's where you can save some money and get enjoyment out of the game. Even if you come in late, you can just go ahead and follow the books and movies, and they're an experience by themselves. And you can actually buy this expansion and then move to this one, and then move to this one, and then move down. Don't worry about the numbering on these ones because that's just, I mean, you want to do them in order, but don't worry about the difference in numbers between them because you're literally moving from campaign to campaign all the way through. So that's another way to do it on a cheaper version. Again, the deluxe ones, they all correlate to those cycle ones, and you can see there's a ton of these things. But that's how the game, I think, is going to continue to go past 2018, is that they're going to continue to release these deluxe expansions. The last one was this one. So they're probably, that's the only one I haven't actually picked up, and I think, I don't even know what it's called. It must be this one. So they actually haven't even finished this cycle. They just started it, I guess, is what we're doing with that. But I've been on the loop for a little bit on that. But anyway, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of help if you're trying to get into the game. And of course, there's all kinds of items in forums you can find elsewhere to get more information on this game. To be totally honest with you, solo play is fantastic in this one. It's a high recommendation. And at one point in time, this would have been my number 1, but because I've experienced so much of it, and I think I found something that's better than it. It has now slipped to number 2 on my top 10 solo card games. But I really hope this was useful for you. Again, I'm not going to get into mechanics or how the game plays because you're seeing me on Board Game Geek, and I haven't done a showcase on this one yet, but I promise you we will. And what I plan to do in my showcase is we're actually going to go, my hope is we're going to do two-handed, and I'm hoping we're going to play through the actual saga. And not the whole thing, but maybe we'll start with The Hobbit and work through that. Give you an idea of what that's all about, because I think that's a really good entry point into the experience of this game. So hopefully this was useful for you. If you have any comments, questions at all about this one, let me know in the comments below. And that's going to wrap up the Lord of the Rings, the card game, in position number 2 for the top 10 solo card games. And in the number 1 spot for the top 10 solo card games is Arkham Horror, the card game. This came out in 2016, so you'll be thanking me later because I am putting Arkham Horror, the card game, as my number 1 selection for a solo card game, and there's a number of fantastic reasons for this. First of all, this is by far the number 1 most customizable card game out there, easily. Now, the card pool hasn't expanded to the likes of Lord of the Rings just yet. Lord of the Rings has been out since 2011, so there is more content that way, but the experience in this game and what was built off of Lord of the Rings, the card game, has truly developed into a game that actually, as a whole, is even better than Lord of the Rings, the card game, which is a gamer's dream come true and a solo gamer's dream come true if you're looking to get into a card game. So back when Arkham Horror, the card game, first came out in 2016, a lot of people were in the solo gaming community were actually wondering about Lord of the Rings. They were saying, should I get in on this? in 2016, Lord of the Rings had been running for about 5 to 6 years at that point, and there was a ton of content. So a lot of solo gamers were very scared because they were being told, "This is a game you need to check out. You need to get in on this. It's a fantastic game." And they were going, "This is going to cost me hundreds of dollars. Like it's not a cheap game to get into." And I'm so far behind that I'm scared I'll need to spend eternity trying to catch up to current release date or current releases. What's really cool about the Arkham Horror the card game, or the Arkham, I don't know why I just said the Arkham, but Arkham Horror the card game is because it only came out in 2016, so the amount of content, this one is again by Nate French, and this one's by Nate French and Matthew Newman and Fantasy Flight Games as well. So Matthew Newman is a new designer built within this one that wasn't in Lord of the Rings, but essentially this was built off of Lord of the Rings and built, in my opinion, better as a deck builder. And the reason for that is, and there's arguments either way. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily better. It just depends on your taste or even your mood. So essentially with Lord of the Rings, if you wanted to play a scenario, you would build a deck. You'd build your deck in order to tailor it to beat a particular scenario. And when you are tailoring that deck to beat the scenario, you are truly deconstructing that deck down to the single last card to ensure that whatever combination of cards you've included in your deck when you built it is going to hopefully help you prevail and stuff like that in that scenario. Whereas Arkham Horror, the card game, runs a little differently. It's more about progression. It's more about storytelling. It's more about you feeling connected to your character that you've built, but without the time sink that can become a problem or one of the cons in some people's minds with Lord of the Rings. So in Lord of the Rings, you can spend a large amount of time deck building and less time playing, which isn't always everyone's cup of tea. So it's not a bad thing, but some people just don't have the time to not be playing a game. When they want to play a game, they want to be able to pull the game out, set it up, and play it. So the idea of building a 60-card deck to beat a scenario and then having to or deconstruct that deck to build towards beating the next scenario and stuff like this if you end up losing, which is likely what happens. Because when you try to build a deck in Lord of the Rings and you might play a scenario and win, if you go to the next one with the same deck, you might lose, and then you realize, oh, my wonderful deck is not as good as I thought it was. You need to tweak a few things, and then you win. Then you'll play the next scenario with the same deck and you'll lose. And so it's kind of like this cycle of constantly, trying the scenario to see how it beats you up and then adapting to it, which is cool, but a very different experience in Arkham Horror, the card game, where you start with a deck of cards, which you can either follow the templates that they've provided inside the base game of Arkham Horror, the card game. And again, the game you're seeing on screen right now is me playing through this way back. I was playing this back when the channel first started, so it is going to look a little bit, it's going to look a lot old school in terms of its production quality and just what I'm playing on and things like that. But essentially, I still had a blast with this one. But the idea behind this is you're going to start with and I started with a pre-constructed deck that the rulebook actually told me to use to start with. And really what ends up happening is you're gaining experience in small quantities, typically, as you play through the game, because as Arkham Horror is well known for, it beats you up pretty badly. So you're not going to come out with tons of experience unless you're really, really lucky or very good. But if you do get any experience from either successfully completing the scenario you played or potentially doing some objectives or completing some objectives in the game, maybe you explored a certain number or you revealed a certain number of rooms that gave you some XP, or you killed a certain monster that gave XP. There's different ways to gain it, which again allows for a lot of immersion, because the scenarios that are built for Arkham Horror the card game can be built in a way that every single scenario is different, and you're not going to know how to go ahead and get that XP until you play it at least once, and then eventually you'll realize, these are the things I have to focus on to get that XP. But I say that to say you're gaining your XP as you play, and when you move into the next scenario, there's not as much of a disconnect as there is in Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings carries the theme over really well and the scenario feel really well from scenario to scenario in the same deluxe expansion or in the same adventure pack. But what it lacks in doing is connecting those together. So what typically happens in Lord of the Rings, even with the Saga expansion, although the Saga expansion is a little different because you're following the movies and the books, so it really does connect quite well. But the deluxe expansions really don't as much, because you're not carrying. I can't say you're not carrying stuff. Certain items might come with you for a certain period of time, but your deck's not being built based on your choices during a game as much. It's really hard to actually decipher that. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is both of them allow you to carry some things over from scenario to scenario at times, but Arkham Horror does it better and more often. That's probably the best way to say it. So what ends up happening is you'll play a multiple scenarios with your particular deck. Your deck is, of course, built for one character in Arkham Horror. So you might be using Wendy Adams. And if you're using Wendy Adams, the deck is about Wendy Adams. So you're going to see pictures of her in the... You're not pictures of her in the deck, but you're going to see treachery cards in the deck. You're going to see things that come up that are phobias that she may have, or things that bother her, things that she, from her past and things like this. So the story element is so heavy in this that, like, when those types of things happen, you're like, oh man, my one character is suffering this. So again, in Arkham Horror, the card game, you've got one deck for one investigator. In Lord of the Rings, the card game, it was one deck mixed for 3 heroes. And that's where that breakage of feeling as though you're actually controlling a character or a person as they progress through the world versus building based on spheres of influence for a number of heroes. That's where that divide comes in my mind when I'm playing the game. So what I really like about Arkham Horror, the card game, and it really satisfies me, is that as you're playing through these scenarios, you may decide, I want to rescue this person. I found an individual, locked in a room, or I found somebody here. I'm going to try to, acquire them so that I can have them later. And you know what? Depending on how you do in that scenario, there's multiple ways a scenario can end. It can end with you potentially gaining a helping hand. You may gain a card. You may gain some experience. You may gain a mix of all that. You may gain nothing. But every single time you play it, the outcome's going to be different. Whereas with Lord of the Rings, the outcome was win or lose. And that's it. It was like you either triumph or you do not. And so it's very cutthroat. And that's, I think, why Lord of the Rings is loved so much, is because it's a very strategic game. But I think the reason why Arkham Horror is a better game is not only strategic, but there is an element of luck in there that can bite you, because every Arkham Horror game has that element of, oh, I pulled... And in this game, there's no dice. It's tokens in a bag that pull out, but they're just as random as a dice is. Or a die can be. But essentially, I love everything this game does. And if I'll show you guys right now on screen, if I can here, just quickly a little bit about the products in the line currently, because it's not that big, and this is where the barrier to entry is really low. And as a solo gamer, if you're weighing your options in terms of which card game you should be going after, that's going to have longevity in terms of releases down the line. Obviously, Lord of the Rings has an established base, so if you're going to go that route, you're safe. You've got content for potentially years. Unless you've got buckets of money sitting around, it's going to cost you a lot to consume all of that content in a short period of time. So I don't recommend you just buy everything. Buy it as you need it. With this Arkham Horror, the card game, you know that you're only 2 years behind, or a year and a half behind, so it's not as bad. And the coolest factor of this is that just recently, or originally, Arkham Horror, the card game, was the base set that came in the game originally, and that was what you bought. And then you'd move into the Dunwich Legacy after that. And from there, I mean, of course, there were some standalone adventures that came out after the base game came out. So the Curse here came out, and I think Carnival of Horrors are the two that came out after the base game. But then it jumped into the Dunwich Legacy. Now, this is where the campaign feel this is really cool. So you can actually spend XP not only to buy cards from your deck to switch out cards in your current deck. So this is where your character can evolve over time. You can actually, there's these little pips in the top left-hand corner, and it'll tell you how much XP you need to spend in order to replace a card in your deck with a better one. So you can spend XP that way, or you can spend XP to go on like a standalone adventure. So you could actually play one scenario inside the card game and then say, you know what, I want to try out the Carnival of Horrors. In order to do that, it's going to cost you an XP, and they find ways within this system to make it so that you don't just get a free ride to choose what you want. If you want to do it, you got to spend some XP, which means you're not going to be able to get a certain card you might want. So there's choices to be made that are important. But if you do actually go into this scenario, you may end up coming out with a really cool, unique item that's going to help you in a future scenario in down the line. So Anyway, that was kind of a sidetrack to what I was talking about, but essentially you got the base game of Arkham Horror, the card game. That was the only thing that was available. There was a couple of these standalone adventures originally, and then they went into the Dunwich Legacy. And then they went through the whole thing just like Lord of the Rings, except as you can see, they've actually put it out finally in an order that makes sense. So you don't have to do what I showed you with the Lord of the Rings one, where everything was split up and it was a nightmare to figure out what's going on. They've actually got things in a row here. You can go, this is the Dunwich Legacy. All of this content combined. It's got the expansion and the 6 cycle packs done. Then they got the Path to Carcosa, which just recently wrapped up, so that full thing is done, and now they're into the Forgotten Age, and they haven't fully flushed out yet. But so you're not that far behind if you want to get in on this one, and you are interested in not only the theme but the mechanics. And if you're debating because you played Lord of the Rings, you don't know if Arkham Horror will fill a void or if it'll just be more of the same, it's different. It's completely different. It will not feel like the same game to you. This is more so reliant on story and character progression. And I say character, not characters, as a focal point because it's your investigator that you're choosing to move forward with. The really cool announcement that recently came out is that they're actually, this is a great time to get in if you're interested, they're actually just coming out with a new box called Return to the Night of the Zealot, and they're bringing out this expansion box which is going to beef up all the content from the original base game plus give you a storage solution. So when that drops, you're going to have a whole bunch of people picking this up, not only to be able to store their cards in a way that makes more sense than a flat box that doesn't store cards very well at all. It just does a okay job temporarily, but once you start getting a collection, you need something better. This is also going to add cards into your pool and a new way to play the game. So it's really, really cool. You can see right here, it says an expansion for the card game that enhances and modifies the Night of the Zealot campaign. That campaign's the first one that comes in the base box. It's going to give you 46 new encounter cards, 20 new player cards, and it includes a premium box, 18 dividers. Like, I mean, who doesn't want that stuff? Because that's going to allow you to not only structure your game in a nice way, but hey, it looks aesthetically appeasing as well. So I'm really excited for that when that drops. Cannot wait. I think that's going to be fantastic. So this is an easy choice for me. Now, what I will say before I end this top 10 video is there's going to be a number of you that disagree, and that's totally fine in terms of my order of things. This is my own personal preference that I think Arkham Horror, the card game, has at this point in time actually taken the first position in the card game realm from Lord of the Rings. The reason I believe that, I mean, I own both. I love both. And I could probably, on a whim, depending on how I feel on a particular day, I might even say Lord of the Rings is better today because that's what I feel like doing is this type of deck building. But to me, the story theme and the deck building in the Arkham Horror, the card game, is so much more conducive to getting and being more productive and getting the game to the table and playing it versus Lord of the Rings, which is more of a struggle to get to the table because of the fear of how much time it takes to build your deck to win. And then when you win, you don't always get that satisfaction of progression. You get a progression in terms of I get to move to the next scenario, but not always every scenario has something that can be brought over. And that's, I think, where there's that disconnect. Now, I will say, lastly, because, again, there's nothing wrong with any of you that love Lord of the Rings and want it to be number one. I would agree with you in most cases that the game could be number one as well, but I really do think at this current date and time, Arkham Horror, the card game, has taken its spot. It currently sits as number one on the customizable game. As the number one customizable game on Board Game Geek, it's 8 in thematic and it's 20 overall. I don't think many people can argue with those type of numbers, and the games even rank higher as a whole on Board Game Geek by almost a full point. It's 8.3 compared to, I believe Lord of the Rings was 7 point something, 7.2 or something like that. So this game has substantially come out and raised the bar, and Fantasy Flight did a fantastic job on this. The other cool thing that I'll mention real quick, because it doesn't really have to do with the card game, is just the books. There are books that came out for this called Arkham Fiction. So if you go to this Arkham Fiction section here on Fantasy Flight's page, you'll find these novels. I've started collecting these because inside of each of these novels is cards that are specific, special cards for Arkham Horror, the card game, as you can see right here. And they're flushing each investigator's story out. So you can go ahead and say, I want to play, in this particular case, as I believe this is Jenny Barnes, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong there. I think it is. I think it is. I could be mistaken. Someone can let me know if I'm wrong. But I believe that's Jenny Barnes. And yes, it is. Right there. And so I can go ahead and choose to play her as a character in the game. You get the actual card for a character. You get an alternate art card with, I believe, potentially different stats. It might be the same, maybe a different special ability. And you get 2 unique cards you're not going to find anywhere else that have to do with her story. And the really cool thing about it is you can read this book before you start your campaign, and it lays the groundwork of like who the character is, and then you can actually build their character deck and start playing, and just feel completely immersed and connected to the character you're playing. And not many board games have that. Not many board games have a novel that then leads into the character you're playing. I think that's super awesome. So anyway, that is easily my number 1 for top 10 solo card games. All right, and with the top 10 solo card game list all wrapped up, I only have one more mention that I want to make here that is kind of a surprise out of the blue mention here. And this is something that I really think is going to potentially dethrone something from my top 10 come this year. There is from AEG, Mike Elliott. He's created Thunderstone Quest, which recently has been dropping into people's laps. The box is massive. It's a humongous card game. It looks absolutely phenomenal, and I am going to be doing an unboxing for the game on my channel following this top 10 video being released. So I hope that's exciting for you guys. What I'm calling this particular game is a future contender. And I'm going to start doing this on my top 10 list because sometimes when you're in the middle of creating a top 10 list, you always do things like an honorable mentions of games that you think could be, but they just didn't make the cut. And of course, I have my Rolling Solo Hall of Fame, so games that would be in the list, but they're such staples in the industry and in the game industry for solo gamers that they don't need to take up a place on the list. Everyone already knows they're amazing, so we might as well just retire them into the Hall of Fame. And then you have things like this, which you have companies come out and say, here's an amazing game, highly rated, highly regarded, people love it, and it's getting a solo playable official variant built into it in the next Kickstarter upcoming. And I'm going, this is an 8.3 rated game. This is a known game in the community. This is something that I think a lot of people are excited about. I'm excited about it. I cannot wait to see what they're going to do on the solo side of things. And I think this is going to dethrone potentially a handful of my top 10. I don't know to what level. I don't know yet. We'll find out what happens when things go. But as we get closer to the end of the year and I update my list or I make my final list for the end of the year, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Thunderstone Quest, ranks in that list. So there is a lot of people. There's been a little bit of turmoil with this because originally in the Kickstarter that's being delivered right now, there was a lot of people that were expecting the solo play to be in the current Kickstarter that's delivering right now. But what's happened is they've actually released information that they said that they're going to do a reprint and then the solo stuff is going to come along with that. So what no one really knows yet is whether that means the reprint's going to come and the PDF for the solo rules is just going to come with the launch of the Kickstarter, or it's going to be like they're just going to say solo play is included and it won't be released until sometime in the future. So I think that's left to be known, and no one really knows 100% yet. But if anyone happens to know anything more than I do, based on what I've seen from their Kickstarter page and their website, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know, but I want you guys to know that I've got my eye on this one. I know you guys probably have your eyes on this as solo gamers, and I want you to know I have a copy of it myself, and I'm dying to rip into this game and show you guys the absolute obscene amount of cards in this one. I can show you guys a picture here. Here's an example. This box is massive. Like, look at that thing. And you can imagine that's going to fill up, if you got a calc shelf, that's going to take 3 games worth at the bare minimum of space on that shelf. I don't even know if that width-wise it can even fit on the shelf. But currently for me, it's sitting on top of the shelf. So I haven't tried putting it inside the actual calc shelf yet. So we'll see if that nightmare can actually be solved. But regardless, I cannot wait to dive into the content in that one. So that's going to be a blast. But I thought I would just mention this as a future contender because it may end up showing up in a future top 10 solo card game list. All right, so I want to change things around a little bit with top 10s. I want to kind of add something in that's going to make the top 10 videos a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more engaging for the viewer, and that is you. So hopefully this is going to be something you guys think is interesting. Normally, with a top 10 list, when I release them, people will respond in the comments below and say things like, this is exactly what I was thinking, or no, this is the polar opposite of what I was thinking, or I'm kind of in between. Some of your games hit with me and other ones don't. that's fantastic, and I love hearing that feedback, and I'd like to hear from you guys as to whether you agree or disagree with my choices, as well as if I miss something that you think should be in the list, that type of thing. I'd love to hear it. But what I'd like to hear even more than any of that, or maybe in addition to that is a better way of saying it, is I want to make it engaging from the perspective that I want you guys to be able to feel like you have a spot to list your favorite top 10 solo card games. So I know you guys are watching this video looking for my top 10 solo card games and you're kind of consuming it in that way, but I really would like to hear from you guys. I'd like to know, what do you think the top 10 solo card game list should look like? And if you can't come up with different entries, for instance, if you don't have the time, and not everyone does, to put together a top 10 list and honorable mentions and whatever else that you'd like to do when you put that together, you can always take my list as you've seen through this video and then just reorganize it based on your preferences and what you think should be number 1 or number 7 or what have you. So I just think it'd be really cool to turn top 10s into a more of a collaborative and I don't know, engaging experience for you guys, so that it's not just you listening to what I think, but I'm also hearing what you guys think, as you're just as much a part of this community here at Rolling Solo as I am, and I want to know what the community thinks of these solo games. So feel free to leave all that in the comments below, because I would absolutely love to hear it, and I will be responding to absolutely every comment that is placed inside of this video. Thanks again so much for watching, guys. Appreciate all the support, and as always, keep on rolling solo.